So without further ado, I will introduce you to our next presenter, Brandon Taylor, who is the Manager of Student Support for TAFE Queensland, serving the Brisbane region. Brandon has worked in the vet sector as a teacher, disability officer and manager for 16 years and been with TAFE Queensland for 12 of those. Managing a multidisciplinary team of counsellors, accessibility, Indigenous and international student welfare officers across campuses in the southeast of Queensland, Brandon also leads the organisational mental health and wellbeing strategy. And I'll now welcome Brandon to present to us about Accidental Counsellor Staff Training Workshop. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, Debbie, for that little workshop. That was very, very good. And I've already got a few little ideas for celebrating and acknowledging some success. I would like to first of all begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land where I am today, here in Brisbane. So both the Turrbal and the Yugara, pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Accidental counsellor, well, I'm sure this is something that many of you are very familiar with in terms of you've either done this training before or it's a course that you've heard of. And the reason why I'm talking about this at the conferences today is because we took a little bit of a different approach, and that's really what I'm going to share with you. For those of you that don't know TAFE Queensland, I'll just give you a very brief little bit of background. So we're a statewide training organisation. We are actually 135 years old, and there's a beautiful black and white photo of one of the very, very first training rooms there in Brisbane. In addition to all the, I guess you'd say the expected and the usual vet courses that we offer, we quite literally have students on land, sea and air. We have students in aviation programs learning to fly fixed wing aircraft, helicopters across the state. We've got students in maritime technology courses. So it's a very large, diverse and varied organisation in terms of what we offer, from entry-level certificates through to bachelor degrees. We've got over 50 training locations and campuses across Queensland. I think in the last 12 months, we're somewhere about 112,000 students, and we've got over 5,000 staff. So it's a big organisation, an enormous amount of very, very good work being done. Now, the background here that I'll tell you a little bit about will be very similar across the entire tertiary sector. And that really is that we were seeing an increase in both the student mental ill health in the classrooms and our training facilities. Our teacher referrals to student support were increasing year on year. Requests to or for advice and guidance was certainly on the increase, and the complexity of the mental ill health that we were seeing was definitely increasing and changing. Pretty much throughout the mid to late 2018, we developed a draft plan, if you like, a strategy for TAFE Queensland, the mental health and wellbeing strategy. And there were many, many aspects to this strategy, one of which was what are the staff training requirements. So we put together a working group so that we could consult, we can have some very informed conversations, identify the issues that all the key stakeholders could see. We included many different teachers, human resources, health and safety, faculty, education leaders, and student support, predominantly our counsellors and psychologists. I will actually use the term teachers today. We do tend to use educators in TAFE Queensland, and that covers everything from our higher ed lecturers, industry trainers, workplace trainers and educators. I'll just use the term teachers as a bit of a catch-all. So in terms of the challenges and considerations, not just because of the scale of the organisation, but because we have so many different programs, very, very different timeframes, not just the standard 2 semesters that we do have. We had to work out how on earth are we going to deliver staff training and then actually have staff released from the various different teams. So the when, the where, and the how was a key part of the conversation. We were absolutely adamant that the training respond and directly meet the emerging issues and the needs of our teachers. So it had to be absolutely contextualized training for vet practitioners. We also wanted to use it as a way of demonstrating how our existing policies, procedures, and frameworks can actually support positive outcomes. And knowing vet practitioners, they are very, very hands-on practical people, it only made sense that the training itself was very hands-on and practical. And we wanted to equip people with a level of confidence, if you like, in those very real and day-to-day situations. As this consultation progressed, and this was very much led by student support, it became clear that we actually had the staff in-house with the skills, the knowledge, and the expertise to develop and deliver an appropriate training package. So in consultation, we were able to put together what we wanted to achieve through the workshop, and those objectives were about helping predominantly educators understand what is it they already know and how is that useful. Some real basics that we didn't want to overlook, but absolutely critical, the importance of rapport and personal beliefs and values and how they can influence our communication. We wanted to cover some of the basics of listening skills and attending skills, about disclosure, and then really get into the meat of the training, which was how do you respond to a student who is in distress or absolute crisis, and specifically somebody who is having a mental health episode, if you like, who may be self-harming or has simply disclosed that they wish to end their lives. And those stages, we call them manage, collaborate, and escalate. We absolutely wanted to encourage our staff to be very open and understand the limits of confidentiality in those different situations, and some very hands-on practical case studies. And we wanted time dedicated to address how other people's distress can actually have an impact on ourselves. That, of course, then naturally fell into, well, what are the boundaries? And led to a whole part of the training about self-care and the importance. And of course, what's often overlooked, the debriefing, what that looks like, how it can be done, the fact that it can be very informal and local, but it's so, so important to do that. Now, I won't read through this text, but this is essentially the wording for the invitation that we put out to staff through our internal staff training calendar. And there was even some conversation about, well, do we call it accidental counsellor? Because as I'm sure many of you know, there's a whole range of agencies and service providers out there that offer accidental counsellor. We created our training workshop from scratch. When I say we, I'll give some acknowledgement to the staff who did that, but it was my team that did that and created it from scratch. What do we want? And we built it out from there. And there was some very open and robust conversation about, well, if it's got counsellor in the title, that's going to scare people away. But I think there was enough of us that felt, no, it's the accidental counsellor. It absolutely applies. So we put this wording together to get people to understand this is going to be where disclosure and the presentation, if you like, of mental ill health, it's going to happen in your space. And you're not always going to have a counsellor to call upon. And an organisation that has as many training locations as we do, you might not have other staff immediately on hand. That's a very real day-to-day situation. So what is it that you need to be able to do in that first instance? And we could tailor that workshop to the individual faculty or even the program area and the needs of the group. So what we actually did is we had a training day that was put together, and we started to advertise this on word of mouth, and we offered a number of initial training days, and we were happy to sort of take groups anywhere between 10 and 20 participants of educators at various different campuses across Brisbane. And really interesting what those early findings were. In that safe and secure training workshop, where at the beginning of the day, the boundaries were very clearly set out for the format of the day. Wow, our teachers were incredibly open about what they were experiencing, and there were some tears. It was so obvious that our staff had increasing levels of stress and worry about their students, that the educators and the teachers were carrying that worry and stress themselves, in addition to all the other faculty pressures and demands. Our teachers absolutely wanted to know, well, what do I do? And where do I say I hand over now? That was very clear. And there was an enormous sense of appreciation to actually have the time out and to work through very real hands-on case studies, to have that conversation with other educators from all different trades, from industries, because of course they were all having some very similar experiences. Of course, like anything, you've got to get the data, you've got to show people what's happening and why, and we were in a good position. We had a very and still do have a very good human resources and workplace health and safety team who understood this, and our faculty directors were on board because they were hearing it from their own staff. So what you're looking at here is the first 90 respondents, so the first 90 people, and that would be about sort of 7 or 8 groups, 7 or 8 separate days. So each workshop is a one-day workshop. And in amongst some other questions, these are the questions that we asked. So out of the first 90 attendees who provided feedback, and more or less everybody did, 86 out of 90 said they felt better prepared to respond to challenging situations. 88 out of 90 said that they would apply the learnings in their role and they would recommend that to a colleague. And 90 out of 90 said they found the workshop useful. Now, I'm sure you'll agree that for any internal training, and certainly TAFE Queensland educators, they're not shy with their opinions, and they'll very quickly tell you if something, quite frankly, isn't on message. And this said to me that not only was it on message, but the consultation in the early days of developing this was absolutely on the money, and there was clearly an appetite out there to meet this need. If I show you some of the commentary, because we like to ask people to put into their own words. I've picked out some of the comments. These are in the teachers, the educators' own words. What is it they found most useful? Again, and educators certainly in TAFE Queensland are wonderfully honest. The conversation starters, what do you actually say? The importance of teacher self-care. Allowing myself to be kind to me. I can't fix everything. Asking for help. And just again, having the opportunity to see that, oh, it's not just me who's carrying this. Other teachers are saying this as well. So really, really important.
5 minutes, please, Brandon.
Thank you. What is it you found least useful? Well, a few people did say, look, maybe the verbal, non-verbal explanation, or there was a degree of repetition. I can tell you now, we very intentionally made sure everyone left with a very clear understanding of some of those communication skills. We never set out to cover how to build students' resilience, but that's one for the future. And of course, teachers always want more free coffee. We asked them what they'd like to see in the future. A lot of it was, well, how do we help students build their resilience? time management and stress management for teachers. How do you create positive cultures in the classroom? So of course, what we've got here is a whole body of work and possibilities for future PD. I'll take you straight to what our survey results look like from 90 up to 350 staff. And it's as simple as this. 89% now out of 350 attendees, 89% have said they'd apply the learnings in their role. 93% said they found it useful, and 95% said they felt better prepared and would recommend this workshop and training to a colleague, which I'm sure you'll agree is a fairly phenomenal result. The plans, well, I can tell you we've delivered this a number of times in recent weeks. So we're actually about 450 staff for our organisation who've done this one-day training. Last week, we've delivered to 13 staff from across the state who are appropriately qualified already to become train the trainers. We're planning further follow-up sessions. We actively encourage people to do their mental health first aid and any other training, quite frankly. On that note of mental health first aid, trying to get a lot of staff out of their day-to-day roles for 2 full days is a challenge. And that's why we started with our in-house one day. And of course, we want to look at some further PD opportunities that will support our staff. So it's a quick overview, I know, but there's an absolute appetite there for educators. They want help, they want support, they want to know how to support their students and to support each other. We're absolutely delighted with how this is going. It will continue. Michelle Keel is the person that I will give all the credit to. Michelle led the development of our in-house product from scratch. She basically put 95% of that together, ably assisted more recently by Louise Kelly from the Brisbane Region Counselling team. We're asked all the time, when will you run this again? When's it going to be available? I've got more staff who would like to attend. There's an appetite out there, and we've been happy to share this with colleagues in some other organisations because, quite frankly, there's such a need. There's no need for everyone to rewrite all the materials. So I appreciate your time today, guys. It was a fairly quick overview, but my word, what an important need.
Many thanks, Brandon, for that fantastic presentation and also your generosity in offering to share the work that you've already done to, mitigate the need for others to duplicate effort. That's fantastic. And just a reminder to